Mr. Nayanan, respected senior former Minister Chidambaram, my colleague Mr. Gopal, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not sure I have much to add because I think both the previous speakers have spoken quite eloquently and quite great detail about the issues. And were I to expand further, it would only deepen the mood of pessimism. So I'm not sure I have that much to add. But let me say, I think, 3 or 4 things that occurred to me as I was listening. The first is that while we may rightfully bemoan or decry the current state of events, the notion of our administration and our governance was already in quite deep decay before the extreme kind of evisceration of principles and values that has happened under this government. As extreme as it has been, we were already probably failing in many ways. If I compare my corporate experience to my understanding of the functioning of the 2 governments that I know, which is the government of Tamil Nadu and the union government, I would say both of them have been under great stress and decaying for a long time. We don't have the construct, we don't have the staffing, we don't have the incentive alignment, we don't have the systems or the platforms to actually administer effectively. That is the truth. We are, states and countries' economy have scaled so rapidly, and we neither have the officers nor the continuity in systems, data, memory, institutional continuity, if you will, to be able to execute a lot of things. Now, in that context, if you now have this centralizing, authoritarian, boundary erasing kind of force, of course, in the short term, that exacerbates problems for everybody. It exacerbates problems for the states, it exacerbates problems for the country. It only benefits one dispensation, and that is the political dispensation that is taking over all this control. But mark my words, it is a purely Pyrrhic victory. The more of this controlling power goes to 2 hands, the greater the doom that will face this country, at least as a whole, and particularly the poorest parts of this country, where the greatest support for this kind of authoritarian regime seems to be. Because I go back to my original point, the system is not capable of functioning in an effective way to deliver an effective outcome, especially if it is not held to account. Were you to have a vibrant democracy where everybody is questioned and questionable, there is a slight chance, a slim chance, that the system can be reformed to the point where it can actually deliver decent outcomes, or at least move towards the right direction. Absent that, we are in a situation where the greater concentration of power, the greater concentration of money in single hands is a clear indication of impending failure. They are not capable of executing anything with that power or that money in a way that will actually achieve better outcomes. The propaganda machine tells us all kinds of things about the growth rate and the greatest in the world and all this stuff. Even after the data is fudged, inexplicably fudged or hidden or not calculated, what data they're able to fudge and show still doesn't give me great relief. Let's say it was really 7% GDP growth. Let's take a 4 or 5 year time frame and look at after the dip of the COVID recession, where we are today, and take that in any trajectory relative to any other developing economy at our stage of the per capita evolution. It is still far subpar growth. So even after questionable data and questionable statistics, we are not performing at the level we need to. We are sitting in a very unique era, we're living in a very unique era in our history, in the global context. Today, roughly 1 in 6 people in the world is Indian. I start filtering that list of people into relatively young of working age or likely to be of working age in the next generation with relatively enough education to compete in some way in a global economy. And now you're looking at India having the potential to be about 25 to 30% of the global workforce for the foreseeable future, for the next 20 years. Question is, what are we doing to provide jobs for them? Are we bringing the investment here? Are we improving the inclusion in the education system? Are we facilitating the transfer of our skilled resources to other parts of the world temporarily or permanently? Are we creating enough pipeline that there is hope? I can give you one particular example where I can exemplify all the issues that I've stated, and that is the GST Council. I was nominated to the GST Council in May of 2021, which is about 4 years after the Council was formed. In my first presentation in the Council, I listed what I thought were profound structural flaws in the way the model of GST was set up. To her credit, the Union Finance Minister took my submission because it was lengthy. I didn't want to bore everybody. I said, I'm giving it written. Please circulate it to every member of the Council. And she dutifully circulated it to every member of the Council and included it in the minutes. I have not changed my view since then. But what is worse than the profound flaws in the design is in the actual execution of the way the committee works. We have so many instances where the committee is effectively just a rubber stamp and not even a particularly well-informed rubber stamp. I went into the meeting one time and we were talking about what work gets done by the Fitment Committee, what work gets done by the Legislative Committee, what work gets done by the actual GST Council, what are the norms by which GOMs are nominated. And it became very apparent within the course of 10 minutes that nobody in that room, there were 31 state ministers, plus all our staff, plus the union minister, plus all her staff, plus the revenue secretary, plus the GST secretariat. Nobody in that room could answer who were the members of the Fitment Committee that day whose report was being debated in the council for whether to adopt or not. It took them 10 or 15 minutes to come back and give us the list of members of the Fitment Committee. Now, I don't take great pleasure or pride in this. This is the level of functioning of a government if it's not held accountable. If politicians only focus on politics and not on administration, and that may be union politicians or state politicians, this is the outcome that you'll get. So I think it's beyond debate, based on the two speakers ahead of me, that the notion of federalism was ephemeral or wishful thinking in the first place in the Constitution, and it's effectively dead now. That's not the issue. That is a one-way ticket to a really bad outcome for the country, not maybe in my control or yours. We'll see what happens in the election. But what is within our control, especially as state politicians, I think, and as politicians who go and talk to the people, is to be more accountable to deliver what we can still, right, in this model of really difficult circumstances and really great pressure from the union government. In Tamil Nadu, we were still able to reduce the revenue deficit from 3.7, 3.8% of the GDP, GSDP, down to about 1.6 in 2 years. So we can do it. It's not undoable. There's a lot of headroom. Most governments, as I say, independent of the pressures of Delhi. Of course, I would like not to be pressured by Delhi. Of course, I would like to be treated fairly. Of course, I would like the Constitution to give all of us equal rights. But even if that is not so, I think there are things we can do better and we should do better rather than just lamenting about the things that they don't do properly. It is a profoundly broken system, but on the bright side, it has profound room for improvement, scope for improvement. And I think the more we have realistic debates within ourselves and with the people, the more likely we are to start reforming the structure. And sometimes what you cannot win by argument of logic or call to reason, results can show that actually it's doable and it can be replicated. So I think that it really scares me when I see the path the country is going in. Because I'll just say one profound thing that I think I've learned in public life. I went to the 15th Finance Commission and I presented as then an opposition member, MLA, through NK Singh and committee. And I said, you say that the Finance Commission's goals are equity, efficiency, and transparency. I said, transparency nobody can argue with. But equity and efficiency, what is your definition of equity and efficiency? For me, the job of a finance commission should be to allocate the finances in such a way that it accelerates the rate of growth and increases the rate of equality in some measure, per capita income, access to health, access to education. That's what equity and efficiency should mean to me. It increases the overall rate of growth, increases the effective fairness or equity of the outcome. I said, if that's the case, then at least the last 5-7 finance commissions have been spectacular failures. Because every finance commission, you keep increasing the amount of money you take as gross transfer from the well-to-do states. You keep increasing how much of it you give to the less well-to-do states. And you keep on getting a divergence in every measure of progress. Not only is it not leveling, it's not stable, it's not widening, it's accelerating and it's widening. What is the point of transfers if you have accelerating widening? Well, first tells you there are things that we can do that are not subject to the union government kind of supporting us. Of course, it would help a lot if they did, but with us giving away more and more money, we have been growing faster and faster. If we do some things right, that's not a given. So both in terms of efficiency and equity, if you take the overall growth rate of India for the last 20-25 years, and I'm not that it's a fair comparison, but compare it to China, we used to be roughly the same GDP per capita, now they're 3 to 5 times us, depending on whose statistic you believe. So that all happened in the last 30 years. That's what happened in the last 6 finance commissions. So efficiency has not been great, and equity has gotten worse and worse. There was a recent fake news, as there always is from the right-wing propaganda, about the fact that UP had overtaken Tamil Nadu as the second biggest economy. And I just watched it with great, amusement for a couple of weeks. Because it is such a stupidly irrelevant statistic, right? If you go back and look at the history of states, particularly till the 91 deregulation, states were not that far apart from each other in almost any measure. The best to the worst was probably 2:1, maybe 3:1. Now you have 5:1, 6:1, because those of us that the human capital and the education system and inclusion, we accelerated dramatically once we had a deregulated global economy. So it would be senseless if UP, which had between 2 and now 3 and change times our population, if they did not have a total economy bigger than Tamil Nadu, something must have been profoundly wrong. And in fact, they did. For 30 or 40 years, UP was a bigger economy than Tamil Nadu. It's only in the last 5 or 7 years that the rate of decline or the relative slowdown has been so dramatic that Tamil Nadu's economy has overtaken theirs in absolute size, even though our population is 1/3 theirs or less than 1/3 theirs. Let's say that is starting to reverse. Should that be upsetting to me? It should be gladdening my heart that there is a state where they've at least achieved 1/3 per capita income as me. After all, the money is going there. Let there be at least some result for it. The profound stupidity of having a debate saying that they have become bigger economy than Tamil Nadu, therefore they have profoundly great administration and therefore Tamil Nadu has bad administration. It's inane, it's stupidity. Look at the per capita numbers even more stark. Today, Tamil Nadu's per capita income, according to the RBI, is 3.42 times that of UP, 3.42 times. Then you go look at the last 5 years. Including the COVID last 5 years, Tamil Nadu's per capita income grew about 11.47% nominal a year. UP's grew by 9.5%. Which direction is this trend going? Then I did the reverse math. I said, let's say that they're going to grow by 2% greater than us. Oh, I think, sorry, mine was 9 point something, there was 7 point something. Let's say they're going to become 11 point something. How long will it take? We continue to grow at 9.4% notional, including inflation. They will grow at 11.4%. How many years will it take before UP's per capita income matches Tamil Nadu's? Everybody take a guess? 76 years. 4 generations. Right? Why are we having debates about inane, irrelevant, moronic things? The country is not on a good trajectory. The concentration of power is the spelling of doom. The concentration of decision making without any voice of reason or logic to intrude into it is a harbinger of really bad outcomes. It is still not our doom. We can do a lot of things at our level within a state. There's a lot we can improve. That's the reality. We should focus on that. And we should hope that someday, nothing lasts forever, someday the people in the north who have been continuously the beneficiaries of this income and continuously falling behind ask the question, what's in it for me? Beyond the temple, what's in it for me? When will I get a job? When will my children get an education? That day, we can hope for enlightenment in a better country. Thank you.
Hi, sir. My name is Hariharan. I'm a student from the integrated batch. My question is to Mr. Palanivel Tyagarajan. Sir, vanakkam, sir. And my question is in case of disaster relief given to the states. Why is there a huge difference between the amount requested by the states and the actual money granted by the center? Is it due to the lack of funds or is it due to the difference in methods of assessment between the union and state governments?
I think it's pure politics. I think like most decisions made in Delhi, if you are a conducive government to them and they felt like being benign to you, they will give you. If you aren't, they will not, right? It's, the reason I was a bit depressed when I was listening to the two previous speakers, it was just the encapsulation of how low our politics has dropped, like it has sunk. There is no decency, no dignity, no kind of concept of shame left, right? It is blatant, it is shameless, it is political in every way. There's not even an attempt to justify it intellectually or rationally or any, it's blatant politics. I get to say and you get to listen. If you don't like it, tough. If you genuflect before me, maybe everything will work. Of course, it's a disaster because nobody is that good. And suddenly these people are much worse than great. So, it's going to fail miserably. The question is how much damage will be done and how much of this kind of complete irrational, illogical, unethical, immoral, unintellectual activity will go on before it all comes crashing down. So I can't think of any other rationale other than they do whatever they want. If they feel, they give. They don't, they don't. It's not like anybody is holding them to account, right? The media is in their pocket. They do whatever they want.
My name is Nitin. Just to correct the Minister Rajgopal, the reference to the BVR episode that you were making, the story is still alive, is there. We were the authors of it. But there was another part that Mr. Subramaniam had mentioned in that talk, which has now disappeared from public records. He referred to the union government asking the states to divulge their EBR data in the last financial year and using that to then choke what states would be allowed to borrow. How do you both ministers see your states having done on extra budgetary borrowings and where they stand today compared to say last 10 years? What have been the inclinations in both states to borrow off the balance sheet? Because the numbers that we hear about are they much worse than they were earlier. And what have been the reasons where it's moved in that direction?
Look, I think it's a very fine line. What do you mean by off-balance sheet borrowing, right? Because I'll tell you at least 3 categories. If you borrow in, let's say, a PSU that has an independent board and that has shareholders other than the government, is that to be consolidated to the government or not? If you borrow at the, the Food Corporation of India, should that have been consolidated in the union budget? And then there's a question of if you do some schemes like the Chennai Metro, it's technically a joint project with the government of India. They put some equity, we put some equity, the rest of the money comes from development banks. So the definition of what was to be included in the borrowing limit was not clear. The 15th Finance Commission brought some clarity. But among the worst violators of this off-balance sheet borrowing was the government of India itself. As much as 2% of GDP they were borrowing. Either they were borrowing in other entities like Food Corporation of India, or they were sucking out the reserves of people like ONGC and basically bringing it in without properly crediting it, right? So, to be fair, I think the Finance Secretary, current Union Finance Secretary, Ms. Somnayan, has done a relatively good job. It was a perverse reason, that is, that they had claimed they were going to do a huge amount of stimulus spending during COVID, and they actually didn't do it. So they had to somehow make their word look true, and so they went and took all the off-balance sheet borrowing that was hidden, brought it back onto balance sheet, and made it look like they had done stimulus spending, when in fact they had not done any stimulus spending. So they two evils were offsetting each other. But if you look now, the rules are very much skewed in their favor. They want to choke all the states, and they're very, very, precise about what constitutes off-balance sheet, and therefore will be brought back into your borrowing limit and all that. I suffered a little bit of it, but by God's grace, I had actually used the other loophole provided by the Finance Commission. That is that if you don't use your borrowing limit every year, you can roll it forward. So both years in a row, I was bringing the revenue deficit down so rapidly that I had rolled over capacity to borrow. But take the Chennai Metro. The minute the government of India puts their equity in, it is now considered a centrally sponsored project, and therefore its borrowings from the World Bank or from ADB or AIIB doesn't come against your borrowing limit. But if they don't put their equity in, then it comes against your borrowing limit. So these are mercenary leverage tools. They will use every tool in their box to make you a beggar and make them the donor. Right? They have not put their money in. They have not put the 3,000 crores in. So we are not able to borrow further because it goes against it. The minute they put the equity in, then it's exempt. So again, the rules are framed to suit their political agenda, not based on whether it's good for the country or not. I'll give you another example. When we first came to government, they had a soft rule where they were threatening the development agencies, the World Bank, ADB, AIB, all the guys, that you cannot fund more than one project per state per year. And so if there were 2-3 exciting projects in Tamil Nadu, we want to do a metro in Madurai and a metro in Coimbatore, they're happy. These are the kinds of projects that are ticking every box in these kinds of agencies, priorities, right? They reduce congestion, they reduce pollution, they're public transport, and they're very easy to be modeled and get the money back. But what these guys did, you can't do. So then I had to go and argue multiple times. And I said, if you do that, you're effectively killing the total aid that India is going to get, because you cannot force bankers to go and lend money in places where they cannot meet the credit criteria or the track record criteria that their internal boards and their committees are going to ask for. So if you try to prevent, you can give an incentive and say, we encourage you to go and do first-time project in state X that has never got any fund. But if you say you cannot do more than one a year in Tamil Nadu, the net loser is all of India, because they're not lending only to India, they're lending all over the world. They have a balance sheet, they have a lending target. If they don't give it to Tamil Nadu, they'll go and give it to Pakistan. It's not like they can only come to India. So at least for the 2 years that I was there, they lifted that ban, that soft ban, and we were able to get multiple projects funded. But in every way possible, they are on an aggressive stance to limit your capacity to function without them. That's just the way they play politics.
Sir, my name is Khushi Malhotra. I am from the Business Finance Journalism course. So I wanted to know what are your views on the country's current fiscal deficit target, especially in the context of how the government is spending this money, and how do you think this will manifest into a common person's life?
This 5.9 is a target they set themselves with no authority other than the market. That is to say, if they were completely profligate, I assume the credit rating of India would get downgraded and their ability to access international funding will go down. But it is typical of the utter and sheer hypocrisy that they practice every day. One rule for them, one rule for us. That they set their number at 5.9 with no constraint. They set our number at 3.25 or 3.5 with all these additional constraints, with all these other variables and controls. And on top of that, there's a profound question. 3.25 of what? Not 3.25 of the GSDP estimate that their own CSO makes of our economy, but of some number that is 90 or 95% of that. So I went and asked the union government, why is it that 3.25, we all agree, 3.25, multiplied by what? Right? 3.25 multiplied by GSDP gives me a number that is the basis for me. The number that you're using is lower than my GSDP estimate put by the CSO, Central Statistical Organization. They say, well, really, we got a problem, because if you look at the way the state's GSDPs and the GDP of the country is calculated, especially under this new brilliant calculation model, the GSDPs of the states add up to 105 to 110% of the country's GDP. And therefore, we will put that haircut on you, not on themselves, they put that haircut on me, and say that therefore that 5%, 10% will be scaled out of your estimate, and then only that will be multiplied. So effectively, they're making sure that your borrowing limit is about 10% lower than it otherwise would be by their math, and that's another way of choking you. Another way of giving themselves more room to borrow, because one of their paranoias is that at some level the analysis of total debt is an accumulation of state debt plus national debt or union debt. Therefore, they want to keep the states down to give themselves more room. So it's actually self-interest as well. So, it's intelligent, thoughtful people will not have much time to debate this. It's mercenary leverage with great hypocrisy.
Conceding all the points that you gentlemen have made, when I look at the macro numbers in the budget, the net share that goes to the states has not actually declined. No, number one, compared to previous years, number one, in its totality. And second, we are talking about a divisible pool from 11% of central taxes, and all taxes center and state are about 17% of GDP. The rest of the economy is outside that 17%. So 80% of foreign investment goes to 5 states. Most of the private investment goes to those states. So you are still able, as you pointed out, to grow faster than the states that are getting the devolution of financial resources from within this taxation pool. So net, you are still not actually put to any great disadvantage.
No, I would strongly argue against that. I would say, first of all, it is beyond black and white that cesses and surcharges have gone up so much that we are not getting anywhere near 42%, what the Finance Commission says. If you're lucky, we're getting 30%, 32%. You may say it used to be 32%, so all they've done is jugglery to keep you at 32% while claiming to be 42%. They're just hypocrites, they're not crooks, maybe. But I have a different problem. If you look at the ratio of government of India money to the scale of our budgets for all of us, which he pointed out, that ratio has dropped. Or look at it as a ratio of my GDP. You used to get 4% of my GSDP as the government's devolution of taxes, and it used to be as high in the 11th Finance Commission, as high as 7% of the divisible pool. That has now come down to 4% of the divisible pool, and 3% or 2.8% of my GSDP. So in every quantifiable way, the amount of money coming from them, either absolute or relative to my budget or relative to other states, has definitely gone down by thousands of crores. That's not arguable, that's math. You say, can you do well even without them? Answer is of course, and we continue to do it. That's why I said, as much as they are wrong and bad and the country is going to pay the price for it, if we do our job right, we can actually mitigate some of it. We can't remove all of the negative consequences of a bad and not unenlightened government which does politics rather than administration. That is a curse on the country that will continue. We can mitigate some of that by being much better at what we do. Certainly we must focus on that rather than only complain about them.